you is to learn more about, the world of youth sports, how young athletes should be training, how they should be recovering. You have a lot of extensive knowledge in this field as you are a current professional. So before we get started, can you share maybe some of the certifications you have currently, and essentially what do those certifications do for you? How do you use those to help athletes?
Absolutely. So it's kind of nice because all my certifications and education and experience is pretty well-rounded. So I'm able to not only talk about the strength and conditioning aspect of things, but also the mobility and the nutrition and recovery and kind of what it takes to, excel as an athlete. So I have my master's in strength and conditioning. I received that over in Wales in the UK a few years ago. And my next certification is I have my NSCA CSCS, which is a certified strength and conditioning specialist. I am also ACE certified as a personal trainer, health coach, medical exercise specialist, and group fitness instructor, as well as having some smaller certifications in terms of recovery and mobility and some additional sports nutrition.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. Next question, we'll kind of dive into, it looks like you have a couple occupations here. You seem like a go-getter. That's awesome. So can you share what you're doing currently?
Yeah, so I have a main job, but really my side jobs are kind of more my passions or my hobbies. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I work currently for Twin Cities Orthopedics, or the sports performance department, I would say, is called the Training House. And the Training House is located, it's really our headquarter location, is located on the Vikings campus. And so I work there, and I also work at the Twin Cities Orthopedics Edina Clinic, as well as the Woodbury Clinic. And I was at the high school. So I was working with middle school and high school age kids for the last 3 years.
Awesome. Very, very, very cool stuff. Okay, the next couple of questions will kind of kick into the, kind of your strength and conditioning expertise. So, the first question I'm going to ask you is some misconceptions around youth sports and strength and conditioning. So I think for a very long time, I think, everyone was cautious in terms of, should athletes be strength training? What should be their primary focus? So can you kind of touch on that, the misconception of athletes should not be strength training, especially at the youth level?
Yeah, absolutely. That honestly is one of the, every time I hear that from parents, well, my kid's too young to be lifting weights or anything like that. Well, if they're doing any type of contact, if they're even playing sports, if they're jumping around, and there might be contact, or let's just say that the kid doesn't have much substance to them. It's, they're smaller, they're built smaller. You got to have some support around those joints, right? So if you come into any type of contact, you need to make sure that you're able to support your body. So if you aren't also taught those foundational movement patterns and form of how, the basic things you learn when you're about to be lifting and strength training, you're not going to be able to move as well playing your sport, right? So we teach you how to move properly in a good environment, in a controlled environment. So then when you get onto the field or you get onto the court or onto the ice, you're able to translate that easily. Okay, so you have that built on, just kind of body understanding and awareness of how your body moves and how it should move and how it should move strongly, right? You can do a squat one way, or on the ice, you're getting down here, but if your back's super bent and your knees are in a bad position, you're not going to be really strong. So that is one reason you definitely should be strength training. And I'm not talking about super heavy weights, even just resistance bands or medicine balls or TRX straps, things like that. Using your body weight also does help prepare yourself for the game setting.
New here. So obviously when athletes come to practice or they do training outside of, their structured team time, how can parents best support their athletes away from the field when they're at home? Obviously, I think you and I can both attest to this. Certain athletes are a little more driven. The ones who, let's say want to get to the USA rugby level, or the ones who want to, play college hockey, pro hockey, they're probably willing to do more than, the rest of the athletes. So how can parents best support athletes to excel away from, again, that structured time as a team?
Yeah, I mean, again, encouraging kind of other sports. I can't tell you how many people I know that rugby was never their main sport growing up because it wasn't a thing, right? It wasn't really an option. So especially in the US, kids grew up playing all different sports, and they're excelling at rugby because, hey, like they were a soccer player, so they're able to kick in rugby really well. Or let's say they were a track star, or even like, a basketball player, like being able to have that explosive power, right? Translating. Now, being a multi-sport athlete is really good to just avoid the, compensations. Let's say you have a weaker side, so your stronger side's always doing more, and, you're developing these poor movement patterns. But also just overall to just have a better idea how to play games, right? How to use your mind as kind of to solve those puzzles and read the field and things like that. So particularly, getting your kids involved in other sports up until at least, they're 15, 16. We don't really want to specialize the kids until they're at least 16 anyways. And I see that really often with the swimmers I work with. That's the only sport they do. And they have so many overuse shoulder injuries that just, they never get a chance to let those relax. And so, when they are able to go and run track or do something like that, they're able to give those muscles or even just the overall joints a break.
So for hockey players here, I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong answer. You know better than I do, but what are some sports that can support on ice performance? If you had to just list off a couple, what would those be?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's give and take with all different sports, right? So there's rugby. Okay, you're going to become stronger, faster. You're going to be a big team support kind of sport. You have lacrosse. Now, lacrosse is very similar, right, in terms of stick handling and all that stuff, but you're still using a stick. So we want to make sure that you're not overusing shoulders and things like that. Now, really, I would say there's no perfect sport. It's just, what does a kid want to do? What does a kid want to try? Maybe he wants to try a new sport every year, and that's fine too. So there's not perfect pairs of sports. I wouldn't compare them too much. So really just kind of figuring out, what does your kid want to try?
And you mentioned the enjoyment piece. Now, is it common for athletes to burn out if, they're not enjoying it? I think, I'm not a parent, but I'm assuming that, if you are kind of trying to shove, the sport down the athlete's throat, it can obviously lead to disengagement, injuries. So would you say that's pretty common with the people you've worked with, is, athletes getting burnt out because they're only doing that one sport?
Absolutely. Yep. So, as I mentioned, hockey was my main sport for a long time, 4 years on varsity. And at the end of it, I didn't want to play anymore because, I had fun. It was just like, my life, it was nonstop. It was every, four seasons out of the year. And even in the summer, I was playing other sports, but I was still going to the arena. And, my parents never shoved it down my throat. But I also kind of I felt like the expectation, like, to keep playing was there. So you definitely want to watch, how that is as well, just because even if you're super supportive and encouraging, the kids still might not be having that much fun. So I think the biggest thing is when they're young, to encourage the enjoyment part, because all those other things of team building and working together as a group and building relationships and listening to directions of the coach, but also maybe being a captain and helping out with those responsibilities, all those things will come to play if the kid's having fun.
Awesome. Thanks again for sharing. This is all very useful stuff, and I hope everyone watching can gain some insight from this. So what are some little things that athletes can do outside of, let's say, their practice time, maybe not including, like, for hockey, shooting pucks after practice? Like, we all understand that. Is there any, like, nutritional sleep related, mobility stuff that athletes can do, and what's the importance of those traits?
Yeah, absolutely. Recovery, you have to just think about, you're only playing or practicing or shooting pucks or strength training or, working on skills, maybe a couple hours, maybe a few hours a day. Think about the portion of the day that you're in recovery. Okay. So you're only playing and training for a tiny bit of the day. So much of your day can be used for things like sleeping well, right? Making sure that you're going to bed at a certain time, putting away phones or computers or TVs to create a nice, good sleeping schedule to make sure you get quality rest, because that's really when you get better and stronger, is when you get to fully sleep, not just your body, but your mind. Nutrition, that's a very complicated topic, but you want to make sure with nutrition is that, you can listen to people on social media, you can listen to people from all over the place, and people are spewing all different information at you, but you want to make sure that you're trusting those with applicable credentials, people who are certified, people who have experience as a certified professional, not just people who, enjoy nutrition, things like that. So, and the last thing I would definitely have to say, mobility, and which is more than just stretching, but that is optimizing your personal range of motion, especially in hockey players, making sure your hips are really mobile, making sure you have good ankle mobility, because your ankle mobility is making sure your ankle can move around really well, because you're strapped into these skates all the time. But if you can't, explode through your calves, that's kind of limiting your strength and your speed potential.
Mm-hmm. Back to the mobility piece, because I feel like that's becoming more of a thing, and I feel like the world of athletics, whereas, let's say back in the 80s, 90s, it was kind of just move the weight and do your stretching.